The how will always lead to the who, right? This week's probe starts with this question. If a leadership profile can be a substitute for leadership, what are the characteristics of the leaders you need around your place, around your community? Let me ask that again. If a leadership profile is indeed a substitute for leadership, I'll talk about that in a minute. What are the characteristics on the profile of the leader you need around your community? Now, what do I mean by that? In January, I was in a room that has gone down in history as the $6 billion room. I was invited to the executive suite of a team down in Florida that was making some big decisions. I was only there as a guest. I and another person was there as a guest, and we were treated as guests the entire day. But I won't go into all the reasons why I was there. But as the day came to its end, and I think we only had the last 40 minutes or so, the HR director for that team needed to gather some input from the executive team before they all went on their ways. You see, they were about to announce their strategic plan, something that they had worked on for 3 years. They had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the infrastructure that would be needed to roll out this plan, and they were about 30 or 40 days away from the rollout. The question that was on the table that day was, what do we need from our leaders so that when we roll this out, things go smoothly? And what followed was a 40-minute conversation collecting insights from the brainstorming session of the things they needed leaders to do and to say to show that they were in line, that there was a unified front, and that this would be the consequences for folks who didn't get on board with the new thing. And the assumption seemed to be that if this group could generate a list, and eventually became a list of 11 things that they wanted from these leaders, and then somehow announce that to them, maybe in a memo or an email, that they were going to get that from those leaders. Right. Okay, you're with me then. The hard part was the whole time this brainstorming session is going on, and I'm very aware that I'm a guest, and I'm the kind of guest that if given a little bit of microphone time could start causing problems for folks. So I'm just trying to be quiet. And she just kept asking, last chance, last call, anybody else got any feedback? And I found my right arm going up and my mouth opening before I even knew what was happening as I heard the words coming out of me. I don't know your culture here. And what we've just done in this last bit of time may be the exact approach to take. But it makes me raise this question. Do you have confidence in your team? You see, there was 150 vice presidents that were going to be responsible for the rollout of this new big grand plan. And I just wanted to know, is there actual confidence? If the plan is going to be resting on their shoulders, is anybody confident that they can pull it off? And then I role-played what I thought might be a different approach to this. And I said, if I was one of those VPs in an auditorium Friday afternoon and someone read these 11 strictures that I had to enroll into, I would feel disempowered. I would not feel that I was known. And I would wonder why they're talking to me this way, like I've done something wrong. So I said, this is what I would rather hear if I was them. Hey, gang, we just finished up the plan. It's all worked out. The infrastructure pieces are being put in place. And now the best part has come. You. We cannot wait to get this over to you, into your hands, because you're going to make it live. You're the hope of this whole plan. I got quiet, looked at the HR director. She didn't look too happy. But the CEO spoke next, and for the next hour, which they did not have on schedule, he began to unbraid for them his low confidence in specific team members, VPs, on various presidents' teams. And to say that for this plan to go forward, Sarah's going to have to change this part of things, and Fred's going to have to deal with this part of his behavior, and on and on and on for an hour. He had a yellow sticky in the palm of his hand. And at the end of it, he pointed back to me, and it's like, Russ, that was exactly the question we needed, and we're going to spend a lot more time on that. Okay, why do I tell that story? I do a lot of strategic planning with organizations, and I'm in a lot of retreat places, and I watch them craft gilded words that go in gilded frames at the end of a weekend. And they've named what will happen over the next 30 years. It's glorious. And they arrive back next Monday morning beginning to make announcements and sending emails about the new plan. You know what happens. Nothing happens. The research on strategic planning says that 70% of strategic plans, very expensive strategic plans, created by really, really smart folks in high places, 70% of them fail. Go to failcon.com and discover a whole conference that exists to discover the insights that can be learned when plans fail. Plans that lots of smart people put together. Failcon.com. Check it out. Well, most plans fail. But they don't fail because of an absence of technological prowess or ability to dominate markets or to execute an architectural plan. They fail because the leadership development process hasn't kept pace with the strategic development process. And that is a recipe for a disaster plan. But what if we flipped it? What if all the time you considered the leaders around your place a strategic asset? And in believing that about them, you shaped the place in such a way that received them, that was hospitable to their development. And you made the purpose of your reasons for being together the development of those folks, as if your entire strategy relied upon them being at tip-top shape to implement it. What if that was the way you went and thought about the world? In the course space, you're going to find some goodies that I lay there for you. They're all supplemental, non-required. But if you want to get some insight into my thinking and the practicality of my thinking, this sort of stuff sounds like idealism, until you realize that there are whole corporations that have organized themselves around a leadership profile. You see, there's things that they expect in people's priorities. There are postures that they expect from their teams. There are practices that they have instilled and they enroll folks into, and they expect them to be embodied around their place. And then there are strategies that are inside of the mental models of everyone involved. Some organizations treat their members as if they're enterprise leaders, as if they can influence the shape of things, so they treat them like everybody's an executive, like everybody needs to be in on the details around grand decisions. You're like, that's impractical. Well, take a look at the Orpheus process that I tease you with inside of the course space. There's an organization that had an ideal of what it took to be a leader around their place, and they ended up removing the conductor. They go down in history as the Headless Wonder, or 26 musicians, 26 conductors. And you say, well, that's just idealism. I've uploaded a reflection from one of their designers, Seifert. You'll see that article there. And you'll see there's more leadership poured inside of the Orpheus process than the average military unit. There's rotations going on. There are contingencies built in and checks and balances. It's a frustrating process if you follow the Orpheus story. Find their book called The Leadership Ensemble and learn a thing on distributed leadership models, collaborative models. Well, Take a look at the Orpheus piece as an example of a particular profile driving the culture and the mission. You see, they located leadership. It's not an absence of leadership you're looking at. They have located leadership at all of its critical points so that what leadership usually does is achieved through a substitute. And they focus on it at the radical level of the selves. Who would you hire into an orchestra that was not going to have a conductor? You think that you'd want them to know music? Would that be on the list? Do you want to, would they need to be exceptional in music? Would you have a way to get a metric out and make that clear? That that's what you need in the person for them to be in a role, for you as the leader to sleep better at night knowing that they got this. Well, Orpheus thought of it that way. Get the best in New York City. Get the best across the country over time. How about sheet music? Does that substitute for anything in the scenario that I've chosen? Would there be a way to do this community if music did not keep the rhythm, rhyme, and the meter? It'd be impossible. So the score and its choreography matters, and that's human. That's the stuff that humans can tend to. And all kinds of other issues. So check out Seifert's article there. The last piece I want to put inside of the core space deals with self-differentiation. Some of you have just lit up around this concept that we find inside of Friedman. And you've signaled that you're kind of on a curiosity mission now to make sense of your own differentiation, your own family system, how you get hooked into these circumstances and finding yourself defending yourself as a leader to these church terrorists and whatnot. Well, self-differentiation as a focus, as a leadership development focus around your place, could only help your place. Imagine it's just not Friedman's idea that the leader is the antibiotic in the system, but what if you replicated the antibiotic by developing all kinds of self-differentiated leaders, people who couldn't get hooked into gossip and triangles, people who knew how to take an evil report, turn it on its head like an Aikido martial artist, and move folks into places of spiritual maturity. There's a pastor in Nairobi, at Nairobi Chapel, Oscar. I believe he's just retired in the last year or so. We took the doctoral program there about 4 years ago, and 4 or 5 years ago now. And I remember how they explained their model of church life and leadership development. They considered their whole community a leadership development system. So that the Sunday morning experience was reframed as the house of immaturity. Now, that's not the language they use, but they considered everyone who comes to a Sunday morning service was spiritually immature. I want you to accept that. I want you to think about that. Consider what that would mean to say that the profile, the ideal profile of someone on Sunday morning who comes is spiritually immature. Well, if you said that, and you said you were in the business, and they called it their deep and wide system, in the business of making them deep and wide, then you would have to organize your system in such a way that could prove that when they're done going through your system, that they are deep, and that they are wide, and that community is deep, and that community is wide. And that's exactly what they did. So at the end of every service, there was a tent outside, and it said, hey, if you'd like to know more about what you just experienced here, you spiritually immature people, that's in parentheses, unspoken, Russell just said it. Go in that tent over there. If you take that step, that's how you start joining our group. But right now, we consider you not members. We hope you enjoy your time here. You're our guest. But when folks go through the tent, and they start matching these folks up with their life group system. Their life group system worked like this. The first thing you agreed to was, trying to remember the Swahili word for roots. I'm sorry, I can't recall right off the top of my head. But you go through an 11-week process of discipleship that culminates with a retreat. And the retreat culminates with an exorcism so that the impurities of your life are moved out, dealt with deeply spiritually. Some of the questions that are dealt with, dealt with the system, dealt with inside of the training system, are what your vocation is and who you are in society and what you're going to do in a rough and tumble world. At the end of this 11-week process and at the end of this retreat and at the end of the exorcisms, it is then that the folks who have gone through this retreating process and this study process will then be invited to join a life group which they will stay with the rest of their lives. That's the invitation. They get to belong with a group to grow together for the rest of their lives. Memese or memene. It's a word like that. I'm going to go find the name of this curriculum and see if I can't get it uploaded for you or a pointer to it or something. But so you're now a part of a life group. Now the life groups are each shaped around areas of societal impact. You're part of life groups that are focused around areas of vocation. For example, government, media, and the arts. So you have television broadcasters and government officials all in the same life group together. You've got vocational workers, line workers, staff workers, learning how to become managers. And they go through about 5 areas of society that kind of map the whole Kenyan society, and everyone fits in one of these areas. And you begin being related to as a person whose life is meant for vocational or sacramental living out in the community. Well, that's the profile that they have for people, and they have a specific set of behaviors and agreements that are required for members who move through these multiple systems at every step of the way. They've accounted for it, what they're looking for. You're saying, well, where's this stuff come from? Well, once upon a time, there was a guy named Paul. And when he tried to explain to people, this is how you organize churches, the way he explained it to the young pastors, Timothy and Titus, is he explained it through a profile. He said to the young pastor, Timothy, hey, as you're trying to organize the church and kind of put down heresy and quarrels, make sure that you appoint leaders who look like this and who look like this. They shouldn't be lovers of wine. They should be apt to teach. They should be faithful in their marriages. It lists all of these traits, character, skill, trait sets. And Paul seemed to say that if you can recognize this already cooked and made moving around your place, fasten onto it. Don't lay hands on it too suddenly. But find out if it's apt to teach. Find out if it's steady in its marriage. Find out if it is a drunkard and an escapist. Find out what's up with this thing. Be in relationship with it. And at a time that you're satisfied that the pieces are there, we think that sort of thing will organize the church. He says similar thing in the book of Titus. Check them out. 1 Timothy 3, 1 Titus, is it 1, I think, at the end of 1, or middle part of 2. But he's got something in mind that he's trying to recruit for. The strategic plan matches the leadership development plan. Now, I want you to think about your place, and let's go back to the probe. If leadership is a substitute, and what I began arguing last week is there are substitutes for leadership. Read the Jeremy and Kerr article for their evidence around this question. And ask yourself, if you could locate into the lives of leaders around your place values, traits, practices, agreements, what would they be? Dr. Pohl suggests some practices. Would you want them to be truth tellers? Promise makers? How about practices of hospitality? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Those are the kind of things that Paul would speak to. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was asked to redesign a doctor ministry program. Some of you might know a little bit about that program. And if you look at its foundations and these foundational documents, I'm sure they've changed since then. My first task was to identify character traits that such a program could produce inside of people. You see, until you name what the profile is that you're trying to develop, you can't develop it. It'll be left to happenstance. It'll fall out in every direction without any quality assurance. And apparently someone else thought that that was important as well. You take the end of the 9th chapter of Matthew, you find people wandering around with sheep without a shepherd, Jesus laying eyes on them going, man, this breaks my heart. Or it said he had compassion on them as he looked upon them. Go do a search on the word compassion, the 3 times it's used in the New Testament, and find that the word seeing is closely associated with it. And know that Jesus uses it at least 2 times. But he's looking at people like sheep without a shepherd. And he called for leadership in there. Breaking his heart, and he says, hey, you guys, look at that. And he causes them to look at it. They see the chaos, the wandering, the wariness. And he says, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he might raise up laborers. He might do something about this harried, bedraggled crowd. Well, you know how that chapter ends. But do you know how the next chapter begins? Chapter 10, verse 1. And he appointed some who would be with him, and it goes into naming these 12 folks that they've been given power over demons and the healing, this sort of thing. The ones who prayed were the ones who were sent. But they had to see something first. They had to become something first. And this first conversation, as we go into our final cycle here, from engaging community shaping leadership, leader is, leader does, community is, community does, that conversation where we did the vocabulary, the general concepts that would get us started, that there's a congruent life. The embodying of it, we move to congruence to look at how a value can chain into a posture, and a posture can support a practice, and a practice will result in projects that we prosecute over a lifetime, the immediate, the intermediate, and the infinite. And our final cycle here now, the expressing of it. And with the article, The What of Leadership Development, I begin outlining this leadership culture concept and giving you several units of analysis to begin penetrating where would you go to shape, to locate leadership and leadership development inside of a system so that that system achieves what you believe should be achieved through it. Okay, that's enough to get us started. Again, our probe is if leadership is a substitute, leadership development could be a substitute. What profile do you need around your place? What traits, techniques, practices do you need around your place for your mission to go forward? I look forward to talking with you.